Why do you come to this church instead of other churches? Any answer? You may be in one of these 5 categories. First, because I was born and was baptized in this church. My parents were these church members. And second category is because I have a church membership here. If you are in the first or second categories, you may be original church members in here. You don't think about changing your church even if the pastor is not good to you or church has little problems. You strongly think this is my church. Third category, because I like the pastor or his sermon. I hope many people like my sermon and myself, but I'm not sure. If you are in this category, you might have moved from another town or other churches. You just came here for listening to the pastor's sermon or for pastoral care. This third category is called pastor-centered church. Pastor has a strong power and church is so flexible by the pastor in this pastor-centered church. If the pastor is a great preacher, the church is growing. But if the pastor is not good enough, the church is maintaining or decreasing in this category. First category, because there is a good Sunday school program or good music, building or services, some people really focus on facilities. The Sunday school room, nursery room, sanctuary chairs, or program. Sunday school program or mother's program. I think this is one of the important factors to new people who want to come to church, especially people who have kids. I really appreciate all servants who teach and support our kids. Fifth category, because I have a loving support group. We can call this category relation-centered church. Do you know what? If there are only 2 people who can have lunch freely or talk about concerns to new church people, she or he never moved to other church. The problem is that it is difficult to find these 2 or 3 support people in the new church. Think about it. If you go to a new church, you may be a stranger to all. The church people will really welcome you and shake hands and say hello to you. Next week you may go to same church again. Some people will really welcome you and shake hands and say, "How are you?" And you may talk with each of the people who welcome you in 2 or 3 minutes. The third week you may go to the same church again. Some people will say, "Oh, welcome back to our church. How are you?" You may say, "I'm good." Even if you are not good because you don't want to talk about your serious concern to new strangers. The first week, you may think about another church in which you can find 2 or 3 supporting group people. So what is our process when new church people come to our church? You may really welcome him or her because you like to see new people and you are so kind and a good Christian. The first week, you may say to him or her, "Welcome to my church," and you may introduce the pastor and the several church members. Next week he comes again to your church and you may welcome again and say, how are you? I'm so glad to meet you again. Please come again next week. Even if you are a really good Christian, it is very difficult to make the close relationship with the new strangers, right? Because you may be a shy person, or because you don't know what you will say to a new stranger, even if you have a lunch with him one-to-one. I think most of our church members are in category number 1 or number 2. But if we want to make a good, healthy church, we should consider category 3, 4, and 5. But category 3 is not possible to strength to most United Methodist Church. So as you know, the UMC pastors circulate to other church every 3 to 5 years. It's like lottery. Sometimes you meet your favorite style pastor, but sometimes you meet the pastor who you cannot love that pastor or his or her sermons. So we cannot be the pastor-centered church. I mean, we can in 3 years or 5 years, not 30 to 40 years. Actually, the pastor-centered church is not a healthy church, too. So we don't need to desire that style church or pastor. Yes, we should try to make good Sunday school program, good worship, clean church building. But I believe that the most important thing to church is making a supporting group. We can say a relation-centered church. Healthy church must have a strong small groups. Ideal small group size is 5 to 10 people. This is not a program. This is not pastor choice original thinking. If we look at the Bible, we clearly see what the good church looks like. Let me take you through the book of Acts to show you the extraordinary growth of the church. And then show you where you put all those people and how they cared for them and how if you will do the same strategy today. Now first let's look at the growth of the church in Jerusalem. In Acts chapter 1 says there were about 120 believers. This is the upper room. It's prior to Pentecost. So we know that they are starting with about 120 people. Now look at Acts chapter 2:41. It says that on the day of Pentecost, 3,000 were added to church that first day. That means on the first day of the church, they became a mega church with 3,000 members the first day of the church. Now look at Acts chapter 2:47. Acts chapter 2:47 says, "This is the Lord added daily to those who are being saved." If you are adding one person a day, how many is that year? 365 people a year. That's minimum. So they got 3,000 plus they're adding at least 365 a day. And we know it's far more than that because in Acts chapter 4 verse 4. Notice it says the number of men grew to 5,000 people. Now think about this. Whenever you've got 5,000 men, how many women and children have you got? At least 10,000 more. So now by this time you've probably got a church at minimum 15,000 people worshiping in Jerusalem. Now look at the chapter 5:14. It says, and more believed, and multitude was added. It says there were more and more believing, and a multitude was added to the church. And finally we get to Acts chapter 5:28. You know, people say, well, how big was the church of Jerusalem? maybe 100,000 members within 20 years. Acts chapter 6:1 says, the number of disciples rapidly multiplied. Notice, we've moved from addition to multiplication. 3,000 added. They have added daily 5,000 men, added a multitude added. And in Acts chapter 6-7, notice this verse, the number of believers increased rapidly. That's the kind of growth I want to see in our church. Or that's the kind of growth I want to see in every church. We want to see that. How do you get New Testament growth? You must use New Testament's methodology. To next question we have to ask is if this church was growing at 50, then 60, then like 100 and 100,000 people. Where do they put all these people? The Bible tells us, turn to Acts chapter 5. Let's look at the verse 42. It says, they met day after day in the temple court and from house to house. House to house. Temple court, and by the way, notice, like it's plural. Court, S. It's plural court, not just one temple court and from the house. It doesn't say they met in the temple. Because they didn't meet in the temple. If you know anything about the Jewish temple, only the priest was allowed in the temple. And he was only allowed in the temple on the day of the atonement. So they certainly didn't meet in the temple, but they met in the court, and there were multiple of these courts around the temple. If you've ever been to Jerusalem today, you've seen the Solomon's temple, you know that those courts there could easily hold 50,000 people standing, because they didn't use chairs in those days. People stood up for worship, and with a multiple services. They could easily have 100,000 people at the temple court. But they also met, it says, from temple court to house to house. This dual strategy of a large group worship and small group fellowship is the biblical strategy and structure for the church, not just then, but for today. When we do it like the New Testament, we'll have the result like the New Testament today. You hear a lot of competition and a lot of conflicting advice over. Do you want to build a big church, or do you want to build a house church? Do you want to have a large attraction? Do you want to have a small missionary ministry? The answer is, it's not either, or it's both. If you want to be a biblical, if you want to be a New Testament, if you want to be successful, you must have a temple court that accommodate many, and you must have a house to house. You must have both large worship and small group fellowship. This is the biblical model in the book of Acts. Now in the large worship, we see this Acts chapter 2:46. It says they met at the temple court. They had a large group worship. That's Acts chapter 2:46. But they also had a small group fellowship. And of course, all those New Testaments, you can find example where Paul says, greet those who are meeting in the temple of this person, and greet those who meet in the house of that person. In Romans 16:5, Paul writes to the people in Rome, and he says, greet the church that meets in their home. So they were meeting in house churches. They were meeting in home groups. We call them small group today. But anywhere else in the world, they are called house churches or house church. And a small group are fundamentally the same thing. They are just terminology differences, meeting in homes, or meeting in Starbucks, or meeting in the office, or meeting in a workplace, or meeting in, a classroom or lunchroom, or whatever. Here's the Bible says, Galatians chapter 6:2, share each other's troubles and problems, and in this way you obey the law of Christ. Obey the law, fulfill the law of Christ. What is the law of Christ? Love your neighbors as yourself. And when you are in a small group and you pray for somebody who's just gone through a tough time, somebody just says, this week was terrible, this happened, and this happened, and this happened. You stop and pray for them, and you encourage them. You give them a pat on the back. You give them a warm, encouraging word. You have just shepherded the flock yourself. You have been a part of a family of God. You've been a part of a body of Christ. You've been a part of a temple of God. You've been a part of a flower of God. And there has been protection and care. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, encourage each other and give each other strength. You get strength. I get strength by encouraging each other in a small group. So here's my question. Who's looking out for you? Who's looking out for you? Here's another question. Who are you looking out for? Can you name 3 or 4 specific people? You who are people in our flock, in our family, in our small group, or in our body, that I'm looking out for and they're looking out for me. That's what it means to be a Christian. That's what it means to be a part of a family of God. That's what it means that I'm just called to be loved. Not just called to be loved. I am called by God to belong. And one day you will stand before God to answer, did you do that one? Did you do the belonging part? And I called you to be a part of my family, a part of my flock, a part of my temple, a part of my body. Did you do those things? Who could better help somebody who's on the verge of the divorce? Who could better help somebody who's struggling with addiction than somebody who's had an addiction? Who could better help somebody who's better molested than somebody's being molested? Who could better help somebody who's gone through the bankruptcy or lost a child or anything good, bad, or sinful? God says, use it. So without your support, we cannot make any change, anything. As your pastor, I strongly recommend 2 things for being disciples and making disciples. First, attend every Sunday worship services in 2018. I'm not saying if you miss Sunday, your life will be in trouble. I'm not saying like that. But you can easily lose the purpose of life if you miss Sunday worship service often. And please join small group in air prayer. Definitely, we need small group leaders who can open their home, spending 2 or 3 hours of a week. please help the church. Please help the Christ ministry. Do you really want to be a disciples? Do you want to make another disciples? Make or join small group when the church opens in April. I hope our church will be not only a family-centered church. It's very comfortable, right? Because we know each other already. But when new church members, new visitors come to here, or even if in the family church, you don't know each other well sometimes. So we need a small group. Not the pastor-centered church. Not program-centered church. But also a relation-centered church. I want to pray with you, but I want to share one of my experience. I started a ministry with the two young people in Chicago downtown 5 years ago. When I started the two people, my ministry was the same. First time we really focused to worship service. Worship service is so important, so we focused to the Sunday worship services. And later, we really focused to relationship. I made a small group. There were like a similar number in here. We grow to 10, grow to 20, and grow to 30, and 50 later. But when we grow each step, 10, 20, 30, and 50, we make the small group again and again and again. So small group is like not just a faithful group. Support each other. I said, eat. Just eat. Eat together. Eat together. They go and eat together. And have fun together. Making fun. Yeah. They just sometimes bowling together, go to see the movie together, or camping together. Together in small group. So I really see the many growing church. Because I'm pastor, I really want to see growth. There is several factors of a growing church. But most important factor, definitely pastors preaching and worship service, beautiful music and contemporary service like that. But most important things, they have small group. Small group. Please let me know, without small group, any church growth? Please let me know. Yeah, I will consider about that. Without small group, no growing. No growing. Because people come to church, why? They want to get a support. They want to get the prayer from small group. Right? If a new church member come to here, you can have the coffee hour. How many times can you talk with the new people? 10 minutes? It's not enough to make the close relationship. So I hope you have I know that you have a bountiful, loving heart. I already know that. And I know that you are really good Christian. You really want to follow Jesus Christ, right? But without system, it's very difficult to say to new people, can we have a lunch together? Why? Yeah. Or if we have a lunch together, it's very difficult to talk one-to-one. But in the faith group, like 5 people, 6 people, or 7 people together, we can have a lunch together or dinner together and talk freely and make a closer relationship. Every each 2 hour, 3 hour, every each 2 hour, 3 hours, talk to each other, close to each other. Sometimes the bingo game together, or Monopoly together. Watch the movie together. Make a closer relationship together. So I hope our church, First United Methodist Church, have a strong two strategy, making beautiful, powerful Sunday worship service. I will try. Yeah, Steve really helped me too. I mean, other church really helped me too. Yeah, I will try. Nice sermon, nice music, powerful prayer. It's a strong worship services. And small group, fellowship. Yeah, making fellowship. And in the downstairs now, our Sunday school teacher really lovely serve our kids, right? Yes. If we have a small group, it's gonna be really healthy church. We can make it. We will see that. Now we cannot see that. There are just a few people in here, but I believe that if you start a small group, if you open your home, we will fill this empty place. It's a recording now. Yeah, recording now. See, I saw it 2 times in my ministry. I already saw it. It's growing. You will see that too. 5 years.